We're going to talk about terrariums, and I'm going to show you how to plant a particular one up. You've probably heard of two different sorts of terrariums. There's the closed terrarium and the open terrarium. And today I'm going to be talking about the open one. Why am I going to do that? Well, a closed one is a little more complicated to make. It's closed so the moisture stays in. And obviously this is a container with indoor plants in it. So the closed one is moist. It likes plants that like moist conditions such as ferns and plants like that. It also needs activated charcoal to absorb any toxins or anything that is in the environment. And it can prove quite difficult to make, especially if you're doing a bottle one with a very small opening. So one that you can do is an open one, and that has different plants because what you're doing is using succulent or cactus plants and providing a sort of sheltered environment for these sorts of plants in some very well drained soil and making a small landscape. It's easier to manage. It may be easier for your groups to be able to do these ones and look after them as well. So what's a succulent plant? Well, a succulent plant is a plant that maintains the water in its leaves or stems. So it's quite happy in very dry conditions. And you probably know something like the jade or money plant is something that you've heard of before, or different cactus as well. So for instance, this is a succulent, and you can see it's got quite thick leaves, and in those leaves is the moisture that I was talking about. So you don't have to water these plants very often, and that again makes it slightly easier to keep and look after an open terrarium. A terrarium is basically a glass vase of any shape, any size. The bigger it is, the more you can do a sort of interesting landscape. But obviously, if you're doing it with your group, you may be able to use smaller ones, such as this recycled jar that I had pickles in. And you can see next to it is a bigger one here, which I can get my hand in quite easily. But of course, it costs money to buy a bigger one, which you can get from charity shops or B&M or B&Q, places like that, but you're still going to spend more. Recycling a jar is a great way of doing a smaller one. So I'm going to show you how to do that. We obviously need small versions of the plants we're going to put in. For instance, this one is going to be so big that it would just fill up our jar. So how do we do that? What's a good idea is to propagate your plants, to take some cuttings from different succulents and grow on so that you've made smaller plants. Of course, they will grow, but initially you're going to have smaller ones. So what plants do I choose to do that with, and how do I do it? Well, for example, here is a plant which is in a rosette shape and is called an echeveria. Now, these are all, remember, indoor plants. We're not using outdoor plants. We're choosing plants that are happy to grow indoors in warm temperatures. So how do I propagate this? Well, sometimes the plants have little babies around them, but this one doesn't because it's a new one. So I'm going to take off a leaf by just jiggling it slightly from side to side, and off it comes there. And I'm going to put that onto a tray, and I've done some earlier. And you can see they're just laid out flat. So I've got some from money plants, which are these rounder shapes, and some from my echeveria here, which are slightly longer. And the reason they're going to lay out is because I want them to harden where they've broken off from the plant. And they're going to form what's called a callus, which just means it's like when you cut yourself, you form a crust over the top. And that's exactly what's going to happen to these leaves. And that'll mean that they won't rot when they go into compost or what they're going to grow on in. So you leave these in a tray like this or on a piece of paper. It doesn't really matter what you're putting them on, out of bright sunlight, just around the house or a shelf, it's fine, not obviously on a radiator. between 2 days to a week, and it will just slightly harden over the end. Don't need to leave it any longer. It doesn't matter if you do leave it longer, but a week is probably plenty of time to do it. And once you've done that, then you can plant them out into something. Now my screen has frozen for some reason, so I'm just going to check why it's frozen. So I can't see myself moving on the screen.
We can still see you cattling, so you've not frozen
Good.
for us, which was
Okay.
hopefully good.
Yeah, okay, that's good. So what am I going to plant them in? Well, because they're succulents, they need to have very, very well-drained soil. So I've put into a pot, and you could put it into a tray, a recycled tray. For instance, this one is just a plastic tray, as long as it's got holes in the bottom, which we're just recycling. And these ones have grown on, these money plants have grown on from being propagated. What I'm going to do with the leaves, once they've calloused over, is I'm just going to either lay them on top, which is one way of doing it, so you can experiment with how you do it, or another way is just to very slightly push it into the soil mixture that you've got. And I'm going to talk to you about the mixture because it's the same one we're going to use for our terrarium. So you can just pop them in, you can put them quite close together. And again, and there you are. Then we've got some nice leaves ready to be propagated. It may take 2, 3, 4 weeks before any roots come. Even the ones that you've laid flat on the surface will start to form roots. So it's quite interesting. And then you upright them and put them into the soil as well. So they need to be kept somewhere that's bright, not bright direct sunlight though, because they're not able to cope with that, but just somewhere that gets light. Perhaps something gets morning light would be best, something like that at a normal room temperature, if you can. So we can do it like that. Another way of doing it is to take cuttings of stems. So here's some money plant cuttings, which I've taken and put, in this case, into water. Now, I don't know if you can see that very clearly, but there's some little tiny white roots at the bottom of that cutting. So I'm going to get my pot again of the right compost mixture, and I'm going to do something. I've just got a disposable chopstick here, and make a hole on the edge and pop that one in. Not terribly deep, but just foam it in. And I could do that with a few, because as soon as they do start growing, and there's another one with quite a good root on it. I don't know if you can, if I get close enough, you can see, it's difficult to see, isn't it? But they have got little white roots on them. And those roots have taken a week to 2 weeks in a little jar of water. Change the water from day to day so that they're not sitting in nasty water. The water begins to go yellow after a while, so that's the warning, you haven't changed it. Now you could put them into these pots without getting roots started in water, but they'll probably take a little bit longer to develop. So again, there's a few nice little roots on that one. I'm just going to pop that one in as well. Make sure that you don't have any leaves below the soil level, because they'll rot off, and that's not going to help at all. So I've got maybe 4 in there. They're doing really well. So that's great. So those are my succulents. So any succulent plant that you find, that you have, that you buy, or a friend has, you can do that with it. Another plant is what's called aeonium, which has these rosettes of leaves. They do get quite big, but they can start off small. So again, you can either try them in water, although these may be not so good. Find a small pot or a yogurt jar that you've made holes in the bottom of, and just pop in. Let's find a nice straight one. There we are. Now this one's actually started to grow some roots from the water, so I'm just going to pop it in again into this. And because they get a bit bigger and they're a bigger rosette than those other ones, other leaves, I'm going to pop it in and just leave it in that pot there. And the same thing applies. Light but not bright direct light on it. And you don't really need to water unless it absolutely dries out. These are succulents. They will take any moisture that's in the atmosphere or in the soil already and will be able to cope with it like that. Another plant that's very good for terrariums are cactus. Now, if you're dealing with cactus, put your gloves on because they're spiny, or deal with them by using them sort of tweezers or something that you can use that you can pick it up without suffering at all. Now, you can see on this one, hopefully, that there are little babies on the cactus itself. Can you see them growing on it there? So, well, those babies are the ones that we're going to propagate from. So we're going to take those out. And I've got one here, a little tiny one that's actually just fallen off. And it has roots at the bottom. I can already see the roots at the bottom. So I could just put that into a pot and of the mixture that I've made, the same mixture that you put your, I'm just going to take this out, your leaves in. And I'm going to put them on there. So I'm going to gently take off, make sure I've got my gloves so I don't get any of those spines. Of course, a cactus is a stem which is holding moisture, and the spines on it are what would have been leaves. So that's how they adapt themselves to cope in very dry conditions. So I'm going to see if any of these, yes, there you go, any of these little tiny plantlets come off. And there's one, I've just got it there. And again, I can see a couple of roots at the bottom. So again, I'm going to put it onto this soil. And I'll just keep going, just seeing if I gently wiggle my equipment. So I can pop those in because they've already got roots. If I take one off that doesn't have roots, what I'll do is just leave it on top of the soil. And again, you're not burying them, you're just gently pushing them in. And then the same thing as the succulents. So all of these, you'll know that they're growing because they'll start producing a little plant at the bottom of either the leaf or the cactus will start growing bigger and so on. So you see indications, but it will take a little while for that to happen. But what it means is it will produce small plants which enable you to get into your pot, into your terrarium, and put them at the bottom. Now, some of these might grow quite big in the end, but you're talking about years away. So you can put the plants in, and then when they really do get big, you can either prune them down or take them out, take another cutting and so on and replace them. So a terrarium isn't something which kind of stands still. It's something that you look after and so on over time. So let's see what we should, how we build our terrarium. Now I've got a bigger one here just so you can see. At the bottom of this terrarium, I put a layer of horticultural grit. Now, it doesn't have to be that. It can be that. What we need is a layer of something what we call inert. In other words, it's not organic like compost. It's something tough. And the reason for putting that in is so any moisture goes below the level of the plants growing, and it stops the plants that we're putting in from sitting in water or sitting in moisture, because they will rot in that case. So it's very important to have at least an inch, which 2.5 centimeters at the bottom. And you could use, as I have, horticultural grit, You could use glass baubles. You could use gravel that you've just got in your garden that you've washed and made clean. Anything basically that gives you a nice layer of drainage material. So we've done that. And what you're often advised is to put a layer of metal screening. The screening that you have on windows when you're in hot countries, now that's quite difficult to get. So what I would suggest, what I've done is had a look to see what else I could do, because what I want is a material that will stop the compost going through to this and therefore stop the roots trying to go down. And I just found some thin gauze almost. They were little bags that I put dried herbs into. And I'm just putting that on to see if that's going to work, just to separate my layer of gravel from the compost so the compost doesn't fall through. So I'm just going to put that on. So anything you can get, but if whatever you use, make sure that it's water soluble, so water can go through it, water permeable rather, so that water can go through. So I put that on, and now what I'm going to do is put my mixture. Now, the same mixture that I used for the propagation in my little pots, the same mixture we can use. So what we're going to use is about half ordinary compost, just ordinary multi-purpose compost, peat-free if you can get it, because it's so much better for the environment. So there it is, the dark compost. And then in that, I'm going to mix either my horticultural gravel again, washed because it gets very dusty, so it's nice to have it clean. Horticultural gravel, or I could use horticultural sharp sand. Now this sharp sand you can get from builders' places as well. This one's got bits of gravel in, so it's quite good. And all this is needed for drainage. Or this is called pumice. And they happen to have a bag in a shop that I went to, and it can be used again for drainage, for lightening the soil. So any of those materials that you have can be mixed half and half with your multi-purpose compost to produce a potting media which is nice and easy to drain. So it's going to look something like that. It's going to look, and I'll put my gloves on because to mix it up, we want to make sure we don't get dirty hands or scraped or whatever. So I'm mixing it up. And so you can see that there's lots of drainage because it hasn't got the dark look of the compost. That's the dark compost, and that's the colour of the medium that I'm making. And you can see I've put, actually what I did was half compost and then a quarter pumice and a quarter sharp sand, just to see what it turned out like. But it really doesn't matter. If you've got a bag of perlite that you've used for growing on things, then you could use perlite instead. So there's lots of options. Or if you're feeling well off and it's a bit difficult to do, you could use this. You could buy cactus and succulent potting mix, ready mix. So that's another option if making it yourself is a problem. So you can use that, and that's already made and it's fine. You can just go ahead, you don't have to worry about it. But it's cheap and easy to mix your own mix and do it like that. And it's also a fun activity for people, because some people really like mixing up all the materials, breaking down any lumps they might find in the compost, and just making sure that that's well and truly mixed. So in the bottom of this jar, I put my gravel at the bottom. I put my layer of gauze, as it were, and I'm going to just fill it up, not fill it completely at all. I mean, you probably only need 1.5 inches, 3-4 centimeters of soil, because you're also going to top off after you've planted. So I put this in. Don't have to be too accurate about it, but nice. You could also build it higher on one side, so you've got a landscape which sort of leans as well. So I've done that. Now, I think I could fit this echeveria in there because it's not going to go into my small jar. It's too big. It would take up all the space. So I'm lucky I've got a bigger jar. I can put that in. So I'm going to tip it up. But what I might do is to just take some of the soil off the bottom. I'm going to put it in my mix. So I'm going to just roughly taking the soil off the bottom. You won't mind, they're very tough. I'm shaking off quite a lot of the soil. They don't have a taproot. So here we are, I've shaken off quite a lot of the soil around me. And so it's much more shallow for me to plant in my container. Now, if you want, you can use a disposable spoon. This is just one I got to take away. And just make a hole in the soil and pop in your plant. Again, what you don't want to do is to have the leaves under the soil. So make a nice hole, pop it in, and there's gently, because the leaves are very, maybe you need a bit more soil, but you can arrange it using this nice spoon or any spoon you can get, because you're not going to fit in gardening equipment into this. So I've done one thing. What else could I do? Well, I've got some plants that have been grown on from propagating. So I've got some of these money plants, which are quite a nice size. They're a good size. They've been grown on. So I'm going to gently disturb the roots by just using a tool. So I can use my spoon again and just take them out, because I don't want to just pull them out with any force, because it might damage the stem or damage some of the roots. So here's a good one. It's a double one. So I'm going to again make a space and pop that in too, very gently, trying not to disturb the stem and get the roots firm down. So because what we're doing when we make terrariums is to make a landscape, then maybe what we actually want is not to have too many plants, but leave space for the plants to grow. So I've still got some spaces around, and I think it might be quite nice to be able to put something interesting in there. Well, perhaps what I could do is actually put my cactus in as one of the other plants. So let's take that out, pop that in. I know that this cactus and these succulents want very similar conditions. Push the cactus down into the soil, although it needs a little bit more. I'm going to get some from my pots and just pop them in. Take it off the leaves. Right. Now, how am I going to finish it off? Well, I think it would need some gravel, because the gravel will make sure there's no moisture on the top of the soil, compost mix rather. And so I can either do it with my hand, although I'm making a bit of a mess and getting it off the leaves. So how else can I do it? Well, again, you could spoon it in, couldn't you? Using your small spoon, and just make sure it goes into the right places without having to disturb. That's better. And again, I can use my chopstick and just make sure that the plants are well divided and there's lots of space around them. Maybe another teaspoon. Okay, as I said, this is going to make a landscape. So what else could I put in to make it look more attractive? Well, I've got some stones with different colours. I've also got some bits of pot. You could use anything you like. You could use bark. So I might just stick in a bit of pot just to add an interest in there. And some nice big stones. Just to cover the soil and contrast with the plants themselves. So there's a few different, and obviously you can get gravel, larger sizes. This was from some gravel around a pot I've got in the garden. And this is just gravel from the ground in the garden. And what I did was, when I took it, I washed it all. So I made sure it was clean and nothing going to affect it. So how am I going to water my plants? Well, you don't want to use a watering can because you could quite easily get water onto the leaves. So the best way is to get a glass of water and just a nice spoon, and then you can make sure that you're getting it into the soil around the plants. Not easy, but you're not getting it actually, you're not soaking the leaves, which could cause rotting. So just a little bit of water. If you do get any on the leaves, just push it off. So this is just an initial bit of water to settle things down and to let the roots that have gone in just to feel that they're not suddenly taken out of the environment they were in. So a little bit of water. It's very difficult to say this amount exactly or that amount exactly, because the other thing is, where is it going to be in your environment? So once you've planted it up, there's a little bit of water, so I'm just going to flick it off that leaf. And I'm going to clean up, because obviously there is some soil. You make a bit of a mess as you're making it. So you want it to look as clean as possible, because that's the whole point of having a terrarium, that you can actually look through the glass and see what's happening, how it looks. So it's a fun thing to do to make that. Now, I've been able to do different things because it's a reasonably large jar. And obviously, the bigger you get, the more you can do. So in your little one, then maybe what you need to do is to think, what looks best? What do I think would look best? Could I just have maybe just one plant and some nice stems, or one plant and a little bit of pot or bark, or something attractive like that? So first of all, let's repeat what we do about planting up. First, something to drain. So I was using some gravel, so I'm going to put a layer of that. I think I'm going to use my spoon again because this is quite small. So I can, if I pour it in, I'll probably get it all over the table. So I'm going to put a layer, nicely washed gravel at the bottom. A bit more. To look from the side, and I can see that got about just under an inch. I might pop in a little bit more in there. Now, if you want to be very decorative, you could put glass beads in there, make it look lovely. You could just put perlite in the bottom and just have a white layer. It's really up to you to decide what you're going to do. Now, I'll cut another bit of this gauze to put together. I'm going to pop that in just to stop the compost that I've got from going through. Again, difficult in a small jar, so use your implements to squash things down. Then, next, my potting compost, my mixture, half and half, of half multi-purpose and half of the other drainage materials, the very important drainage materials. I'm going to mix that up. And again, I think I'm going to use something small to put it in so I don't get it everywhere. I've made sure there's no lumps and bumps. So another inch or so of that, that's enough. By just banging it down. So what am I going to put in? Well, I think in this situation, maybe just one plant would be a good thing to put in. And I've got here something called kalanchoe, mother of thousands. And they're called mother of thousands because along the leaves, I should try and show you a biggish leaf. Can you see this one? There, or there. It has a sort of serrated edge, a ziggy-zaggy edge. And as it grows, little babies appear along the edge of the leaf and they will fall off and create new plants. So that's why it's mother of thousands, because if you can imagine on every single edge of this leaf, there will be a little baby, then you get 20 on each leaf. So you do have that. So this is called kalanchoe, or as I say, mother of thousands. So let's have a look and see if we can get one out easily. I'm going to use my chopstick. I'm going to go in and see if I can get it out. Now, it may be that the roots are bound together. They feel quite as if they have. Let's have a look and see. Yeah, it formed sort of a round ball. So I'm going to have to go in gently with my fingers and sort of gently tease it apart and see if I can't get one of the nicer plants in there to put in. Yes, that's a good one. That's a good one. Right, I'm going to make a little hole with my spoon. And I'm just going to pop it in there without damaging the roots. Just pop it in, and then maybe what I'm going to do is just spoon a little bit more soil, compost mixture, in around it. I have small hands and it's quite difficult for me to get my fingers in, you can see. I'm just going to push it with my spoon. And then I'm going to look for some more stones. These are slightly bigger than the horticultural grit, so they're going to show up better. So I think I'm going to use those around it. And I'm just going to make sure the plant doesn't get pushed over. So I've got one finger on the plant, very gently, with my gloves on again. And I'm just going to cover it up with a layer, cover the soil up with a layer of my bigger gravel. And then just gently push that down with the spoon to make sure everything's in place. So in this one, I've just got one plant, you can see just one plant, but actually that'll be fine. Or if you have two tiny little seedlings, you might be able to put two little seedlings in there. But the fun thing is just to have one plant. Very messy job this. So make sure you've got something covering your table. Let's clear up, see if we can't see that one. Take my gloves off. So there's my one plant. And you can see from the outside, you can see the gravel and you can see the plant. So that's quite fun, especially if you were making it for a present for someone. And if you wanted, you could put maybe one bigger stone in just to make it look different, or two ones to make it look a bit different too. There you go, there's a couple there just to add to the interest. And again, my glass of water and a spoon, and just very gently water, not on the leaves, but on the soil and the stones surrounding it, so that it's getting some water, but you're not creating too much. So you don't need to add very much. There it is. Let me just tidy up a bit here. And then we can see our two terrariums that I made today. There's the big one, there's my hand on it, so you can sort of see the size, I hope, which is lovely. But this is a nice one to do. And if you've got a big group, then you could save these jars. This was a pickle jar, and everybody can have a go, especially if you've propagated some nice little plants to add to it. So what do we do with them? We don't, like the material we were talking about propagating, we're not going to put them straight into sunlight. Although they will tolerate sunlight, they won't do it yet because those roots aren't really into the compost yet. So again, somewhere bright, somewhere with some good light, but not direct sunlight. So again, if you've got morning to lunchtime sunlight, that would do it first. And I would leave it there for a few weeks just to let it settle. And then you could put it somewhere brighter. Don't put it outside, even if it's a bright sunny day in the summer. You never know when maybe rain will come. Watering, you can tell with succulents that their leaves begin to wrinkle slightly when they're completely out of water. And that's fine, they can still survive it. So that's a warning sign for you to, again, small amounts of water, much better to do that. So in the winter, you hardly need to water at all. Probably, maybe once a month, if that. You can look at them and see what you think by looking at the leaves of the succulents. In the summer, maybe every couple of weeks or so, a little bit, but really not much at all. So I hope that's been helpful and that you might have a go. And now we can talk about it. Any questions you've got? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Does anybody have a question for Caroline that they would like to voice or pop in the chat? Feel free to just unmute and voice your questions, or you can pop your hand up. Just going to remove this spotlight, Caroline, so we can see you.
Hi. It's been fun making these. It's quite a messy job, as you have seen with me, with compost all over the place. But it's really fun to be able to make these little environments for the plants. And propagating succulents is very easy. It might take a little while, but this is the time of year for you to be starting. So we're just going into spring, and that's a great time to start propagating because you get more light and the temperatures are beginning to go up. So it's all very helpful to propagate. Maybe
Kath is saying great.
Sorry, go on.
I was just saying that Kath's put in the chat saying, great demo, well described and illustrated, thanks.
Oh, pleasure. Sure. If anybody has got any questions and they've already got terrariums, please, or have done it successfully, let us know, because it's always good to have people's experiences of terrariums too.
Hi, I have one terrarium, which is a closed one. I got it as a gift for my birthday this year, so I've been experimenting with that. If you wanted to turn like the little jam jar one,
yeah,
could you put a lid on that and turn that
yes.
into,
it would do the same. You can basically anything with a lid on, or you could make a lid, you can use. And as you may have experienced, you just got to be careful about the amount of moisture that's in there. So
Yeah.
if you feel it's getting moisture on the glass, then you just open it up for a little while and let the moist air out. So of course you can, if you can find a container that will fit the right sort of plants, and obviously it has to be plants that are suitable for moist conditions.
Yeah.
You can
That's
certainly do
great.
that.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Anybody else got any questions, or have they had a shot already at making one? Or like Caroline says, have you got one and you get any questions about the care or anything like that?
Yeah, the other thing about if you've got a closed one is not to put it in bright conditions, because you're dealing with a completely different environment. So actually the closed ones with ferns and plants that prefer being moist is that they should have light, of course, but not direct sunlight and not bright light, which your open ones will tolerate once they get established. So if you get given one and you're not sure, then yep, you need to just put it somewhere comfortable, with
I was
comfortable
lucky with
temperature.
mine. I got little light in the cork that goes in the top.
Ooh,
So
ooh,
yes.
how nice.
It was for a big birthday, so it was good. And
Oh,
it's lovely. It's been really good fun to do.
oh, that's great. How
But
big is your terrarium?
it's just maybe about 6-8 inches across. It's not huge, it's just a
Okay.
small one to start with.
Uh-huh.
So these ones have been good to see today because obviously mine's is closed, so that gives me the open one. So thank you very much. It's been really good.
No, that's a pleasure, because you could have both, couldn't you? Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Doing
I'll
different
end up with
things.
lots. Got the plant
Exactly.
magnet. So
Yeah,
thank
yeah.
you.
No, pleasure. And of course, you can search around charity shops and things like that to get interesting glass containers. Because anything, as long as you can see the plants through the glass, is fine.
I think that might be us for questions. I'm just having a quick scan just to make sure there isn't anybody put their hand up or anything. No, I think that's us. Caroline, anything else you want to add before I finish up?
I hope I've added everything. Really. There's lots of information online, though, if you're not sure and you haven't made notes, or you can obviously watch this back again and make notes again when it comes up on YouTube.
Great. Thank you very much, Caroline.